Thank you, Nigel. It's always better if somebody else talks positively about your brand and you don't have to. But thanks for your kind words of that organisation that I've invested a lot of my time in, because I actually believe in that brand. I don't typically stand up and do, particularly at CEDA, it's not about selling products, it's about bigger things. It's about what we need as a society, what the economy needs, and how we move Australia forward in this instance. Earlier in the week, the national CEDA conference was up in Canberra, and the theme there was resilient workforce. And the theming that's been chosen here by Hamilton is actually fits very, very nicely. And it fits even more nicely when we consider the announcements of yesterday, the award of the frigate project. I'm assuming there are some BA people in the room. I'm not sure whether Novantia and Fincantieri people are at the moment. Commiserations, having lived through a submarine project that didn't go the way of the Germans, I can understand how you're feeling. But these projects are so vast that we all need to be assisting no matter what occurred in the decision making. Those sorts of projects stimulate the economy and stimulate jobs. Those sorts of projects to be classified as successful are the ones that actually leave us with more than the ship. Defence programs that leave us with the armoured carriers is fine, we'll have those. The question is, have we got skills that we've learned over that spend that take us further forward, that enable us to compete better in that future world? And that's the theme, and that's what that video was trying to get towards. Why are we doing these software grants, and do we actually understand the dimension of the gap between where we are and where we need to be to take the society from where it is today in terms of skills and where it needs to be if we think about the fourth industrial revolution and Industry 4.0. So let me try going forward. I have spoken at CEDA before in South Australia. It won't be the first time I've actually reminded myself that the very first internet in Australia was actually the overland telegraph between Darwin and Adelaide. And that was Siemens' very first project in Australia. And in 2022, we'll celebrate 150 years in this country. So it's not a fly-in, fly-out association with the country. We're deeply Australian in the country for the country. But it means that we have to facilitate the country being competitive and be able to export its skills to the rest of the world in an environment that actually, in one sense, provides a threat, meaning incoming digitalisation from other countries, but also the opportunity, because we can sell into other environments just as easily. So the tyranny of distance changes the game, but actually as both as two sides of a double-edged sword. In the centre there, energy transformation. Yes, we do energy projects. We were deeply, and I'm very proud that we contributed towards the City of Adelaide City Performance Tool, which talked about what are the lowest hanging fruits to do first to get Adelaide to be carbon neutral as an aspiration. We also wrote the hydrogen roadmap together with Worley and a number of others, talking about how can we use this installed renewable energy to create other forms of energy storage in the form of hydrogen and actually create additional industries. I mentioned last time I was at CEDA that there is 3 moonshot projects in Australia, one being Save the Barrier Reef, second one, which I like at my age, that Australians should live longer than any other race anywhere else in the world. And the third is, can we actually get Australia ready for a hydrogen economy? Can we actually create a hydrogen city of 100,000 people and learn all the skills that are necessary to participate in what will come in the form of a hydrogen economy? And the last one, and I mentioned it there, I'll come back to it in a moment, this digital transformation and this product lifecycle management. That's what that acronym means. Apologies for that. That's about managing an asset through its entire life, digital twin discussion. Okay, so let me explain why I'm so passionate about this topic, Industry 4.0. Somebody said to me, and I've repeated it several times, oh, well, that Industry 4.0 thing is just a marketing ploy by the Germans. It's actually much, much, much more. In a very systematic way, the best thing about the Germans is that they see a problem and they divide it up into parts, they get it organised and they go about addressing the issue. There was a G20 meeting held in 2014. The Prime Minister at the time, Tony Abbott, and Angela Merkel decided that we need to enhance the relationship between Australia and Germany, because it was nice and friendly but underdone. There were 59 recommendations put in place at the time, and one of them, an innocuous number 10 that I've written down the bottom there, talked about we really should understand what this Industry 4.0 thing is that you're working on, and how can we collaborate with you to make sure that Australia doesn't get left behind, contributing to this, primarily at that stage, the standards, but understanding what we would need to do as a society in Australia to get ourselves closer to that future. So there was a Prime Minister's Industry 4.0 task force put together. What you see on the bottom part of that graphic is the 4 work streams that the Germans came up with, run by their different institutions in Germany, if you like. The program in Germany, Industry 4.0, is bipartisan. So the Grand Coalition in Germany both supported the need to transition the German manufacturing economy into something that it wasn't yet. It's academia, it's education, of course, industry, government, and across on the right-hand side, you might notice there's a work stream called Work, Education, Training, Employment and Apprenticeships and Lifelong Learning. A bit of a mouthful. But the person who's leading that work stream is actually the head of the largest union in the world. And if you're going to talk about the future of work, I think you better rather have the people that are going to be affected by the future of work at the table, understanding the consequence and giving input about how that evolution may take place. You can see along the top, we replicated that structure. We came up with our own individual work group by work group topics that we thought we might, as Australia, need to learn more about what's going on there, take it, contextualise it, and implement or influence as we choose in Australia. So this is not eating somebody else's given format, but actually it represented the Germans saying, Australia is a friend, and anything we have developed, you're welcome to use. That culminated with the signing of a platform-to-platform agreement, one of only 5 in the world, between the Australian group and the German Platform 4.0. And that's a point to say, if I have a title that's called the Prime Minister's Industry 4.0 Task Force, and there's a new Prime Minister tomorrow, what does that mean about that particular project? What could it mean? And this particular thing is not about partisanship. It is about a framework to get from a point to another point in the future. So, not surprisingly, the decision, I'll go forward there too in a minute. No, I won't. It's gone back. The decision then, after that meeting, was we need to move from the Germans talking to the Germans in that conversation, as far as the representatives from German subsidiaries, into the Australian institutions, talking about what does that mean. So the Australian Industry Group is now the host for the entire activity Industry 4.0. Engineers Australia. Trish White would be known to many of you in this room as previous Education Minister, but President, she's sitting down there on the left in the bottom. As President of Engineers Australia, engineering has a large part to play in the accreditation of courses that are going to need to be written and changed over that future. Education, represented by Swinburne, and not shown in that picture there is the AMWU. Andrew Detmar, the President of the Australian Manufacturing Workers Union, is actually on that workstream Future of Work, to make sure that we don't have any divide and we have some future continuity in what we're trying to do with that program. So just repeat, it's not about technology alone. Industry 4.0 as a program is a holistic model that's saying these are the areas we need to work on to get us from the third automated world to the cyber-physical world that we're going to be seeing in the next 20 years. It doesn't exist yet. If somebody says to you, I will sell you Industry 4.0, they probably haven't understood the platform. They've just probably got some wireless devices to sell to you. What we're doing is much, much bigger, and it's about society. So the work stream that talks about the future of work, and I think it's fair to say, without criticising any educational institution, the focus is on what they are doing. And many of the group of 8 universities in the need to have the undergraduate courses, take engineering as an example, funding research to write papers to get the ranking of the university up to attract international students. Don't apologise if I oversimplify that, but that's the model that we're confronting, where perhaps education in that sense is not actually designed necessarily for job-ready outcomes. That sense that we've had over a very long period of time that education is for the purpose of teaching people to learn. Now comes back, if you believe that we've got an industrial revolution happening, and if we're lucky enough to see it prospectively rather than retrospectively, then what are the sorts of things we need to be changing in education? So along the way, because I had a thought leader from Swinburne University on education, and Swinburne University I repeat several times because they're lucky. They actually have an institution that has a TAFE at one end, they do undergraduate and associate degrees, and they do research in one institution. Very lucky. So if you say to them, we'll give you $150 million worth of industrial software, by the way, that's the commercial value. Can you use that for TAFE courses? Can you design higher apprenticeship programs? Can you let your undergraduates use it? Can you use it for research? All in education. They do it relatively easily. So the first pilot program, there was a software grant. We decided we needed to try to replicate the apprenticeship situation that the Germans have had running for 500 years. It's not new. For them, it's a little bit strange to think that people don't do higher apprenticeships. That you do automation, you learn how CAD CAM works, and you don't need to be doing an undergraduate degree for that. So there's a model that we took out of that institution that Nigel referred to before in Berlin, gave it to Swinburne, contextualised it, wrote a course. The federal government co-funded the pilot program together with Siemens and the Australian Industry Group. And on top of that, we built the first of the test labs, advanced manufacturing test labs. So that's the environment where we provide the educational background for these advanced capabilities that we're talking about in the future. I'll say at that point, I mentioned the word advanced manufacturing. There was a period around about the time that G20 meeting took place that certain people who had rather high positions in the country were saying, well, we can't really do shipbuilding. That's not really something for us because that's actually simple labour-intensive activity, and we should let the Koreans do that. And we just should take finished product. And there were a number of us who thought, well, actually, advanced manufacturing in the digital world gives us a lot more opportunities, and it won't actually be the sorts of labour-intensive activities that were thought about at that time. So it was a big effort at the time to shift and introduce the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, for example, to talk about in the country and lift this confidence. Yes, we can still manufacture. It will look different, but we still can do it. I'm getting close. So the software grants were rolled out. The first one in Swinburne, you can see at the top. The next one was Uni Western Australia. Now, Uni Western Australia is an interesting one because that's a group of 8 university. Dawn Freshwater, the Vice-Chancellor there, coming from the UK, when we said to her, well, okay, you can have a software grant. And we had no shortage of people who actually put up their hand for $300 million in this particular case, as you can imagine. We said there's a catch. The catch is you have to run across the road to Perth TAFE. And you have to actually open your campus to them, and you have to let them use the same software tools and make sure the curriculum is written around that environment. And you have to build a test lab. You have to apply for a government grant to build that test lab environment. So no free lunch, but significant amounts of inducement to try that. So the second was Uni Western Australia. And only on the 5th of June, and that is showing the excitement of the announcement of the $450 million software grant that has been given to Uni SA, with all of the licenses, all of the simulation tools, engineering tools, and sorts of skills that kids are going to need to have, not only kids, but also mature age, as we're moving into these large platform projects. All of the prime builders have their own forms of digital tools. It's not about the Siemens tool. but it's about the skills and the simulation, the digital twin capability, the whole of life mentality on these programs. And if you learn all of that, then you actually are at a level of understanding that you can actually work from South Australia when those projects are gone on the projects in the United States, for example, because you're working online on those electronic tools. So manufacturing, in a sense, is changing dramatically. That's a beautiful photograph, and I think that's actually at Berlin during the Hanover Fair, where we were there with the apprentices. So these kids, the first flight pilot group, 25 kids, that particular lady at the front there, Gabby, interesting set of circumstances. She had started a degree course. She ended up being a single mother, couldn't complete the first year, was really struggling financially, and actually was managing a beauty therapy retail shop, and put her hand up for this apprenticeship program. And she's one of the stars of the program. Second example of the types of person we're creating, we have Siemens our own store environment, warehousing environment, and we decided to let a larger organisation, 3PL, organise that for us. But we said to any of the employees at that store, if you would like to have jobs elsewhere, would you like to put up your hand for this apprenticeship program for the next flight? You're more than welcome. And we have 2 of the storemen who have come across and actually are now participating in this advanced apprenticeship program. So I think they're very, very great stories on the sorts of things. And this, by the way, the storemen are 40 years old. These are people who are saying, yes, I need to change my skills mid-career. That was in Berlin. Those apprentices actually, over the summer breaks, they committed to run kids camps, code camps, which we're running at lower primary school level. And the enthusiasm that's created as those kids talk about cobots and all those sorts of things that I couldn't have imagined when I was at primary school, to just immerse them in the opportunities of the digital world. I've spoken about that forum now. Standards Australia is heavily involved. The IMCRC, Innovative Manufacturing CRC, is leading the work stream. AusCyber is a critical one. In the meantime, the discussion about cyber security has become more and more important. I don't mean it from the protection, privacy or IP protection. I'm talking about infrastructure. How do we make sure infrastructure in the nation doesn't get simultaneously brought down? All of those open access points that are built via the digital economy, power electronics around systems. How do we make sure that somebody doesn't get in there and then actually brings them all down? You can't put patches in them because they'll put in too early. They don't have the software capability. So that open infrastructure we've got sitting there does represent quite a challenge to make it secure over time. So how we go about that, what are the standards, what are the priorities, who do we work with overseas, is a very, very important topic. I've mentioned the last 2 categories there. Getting close. At the Hanover Fair, which is the world's largest automation fair, it's not a South Australian example, but it's a great Australian example, and I suspect most people in Australia at some point in time have attended Dulux Paint somewhere in their house to try and touch something up. Dulux just built a state-of-the-art paint manufacturing plant in Melbourne, actually north of Melbourne. And that's all about the essence of what Industry 4.0 is. It is about speed of implementation, product life cycles, the interaction between the production line and the product itself, and eliminating non-conformance costs to compete. Dramatically reducing batch times, removed 75,000 manual steps. So those sorts of technologies behind there are in the background, they exist already and they're coming. The question is, how do we get on, how do we start, how do we get on that journey and actually learn to sell those skills elsewhere? That's not that I'm being disrespectful to the Prime Minister, but actually that is at the German Embassy in Berlin. I can see Gabby standing there at the front. But I don't know how you feel about that photo. The smiles on those are the apprentices, by the way, the Industry 4.0 apprentices, the first flight. They'd been taken to Europe as the final part of their program for that year to the Berlin Centre. And they were lucky enough that the Prime Minister happened to be there, and there is a lot of optimism. Those smiles are gold for me. That's a lot of what we're trying to do in these education programs, is trying to lift the vision up beyond the doom and gloom, beyond the where are the jobs going to come to doing something actually about it. I'll end there. I think I've used up my allotted time plus with a short video link. Thanks. Today it gives me great pleasure to announce the $450 million worth of industrial software to contribute to their expansion and development over time.
I want to extend a formal note of thanks to Jeff and to Siemens for their outstanding generosity. I will restate the figure. $450 million worth of software will allow us to prepare our students to be at the cutting edge of the fourth industrial revolution.
This incredible act of generosity by Siemens will enable the students at the University of South Australia to learn on the most advanced software of its kind in the world. This will provide them with a great advantage when they go into the workforce.
It's a great pleasure to be here at what is another manifestation of what it means to have Australia's naval shipbuilding industry focused here in South Australia, in Adelaide.